All right, let's just go straight at it. If your MSP is growing, but somehow your life is getting worse, this video is for you. And I mean that literally, because a lot of MSP owners think the pain they're feeling is just, part of growth. More clients, more tickets, more people, more complexity. So they tell themselves, okay, cool, I guess this is what scaling feels like. No, not exactly. A lot of the time, what feels like growth pain is actually documentation failure wearing a growth costume. And that matters because if you misdiagnose the problem, you build the wrong fix. You hire more people when what you really needed was more transferability. You buy more tools when what you really needed was more clarity. You keep jumping in to save the day over and over, and then you wonder why the business gets bigger but never actually gets lighter. So in this lesson, we're going to talk about how to scale an MSP through documented delegation. Not random delegation, not, hey, can you take this off my plate delegation. I mean the kind of delegation where the task leaves your head, becomes a documented system, and then stays done without crawling back onto your calendar 3 days later. We're going to cover why this matters right now, what bottleneck you're probably feeling even if you haven't fully named it, what documented delegation actually looks like inside an MSP, and why the MSPs that get this right can grow without turning the owner into the permanent escalation path. Because look, that's the pain most people are feeling, right? It's not just, I'm busy. It's more like, why does every serious issue still somehow come back to me? Why do I have a team but I still feel alone? Why do I keep hiring people and still feel like I'm the operating system? That's the real pain. And recent MSP research makes this really uncomfortable, honestly. One recent piece pointed out that 58% of MSPs struggle to enforce SOPs across their teams, and 51% struggle to document client environments accurately. So if your team is asking the same questions, escalating the same stuff, and searching all over the place for answers, you're not crazy. That is a real operational problem in this space right now. And then you stack that on top of the reality that technicians can lose 1.8 to 2.5 hours a day just searching for information, retracing decisions, or figuring out what the right way is for a client or task. That's not a productivity issue. That's a system issue. So here's the contrarian point I want to make early. The thing slowing your MSP down probably is not a lack of effort. It's not even a lack of talent. It's that too much of the business still lives in people instead of process. And if it lives in people, especially in you, then growth actually makes your business more fragile, not less. That's the trap. And it's a nasty one because it disguises itself as importance. You start telling yourself, well, of course they need me on this. I'm the founder. I'm the senior operator. I'm the one who knows the client. I'm the one who sees the nuance. Maybe. But if everything important requires your nuance, then what you've built is not a scalable MSP. You've built a highly stressful job with payroll attached. That sounds harsh, I know. But it's also the unlock, because once you admit the real bottleneck is undocumented decision-making and undocumented execution, now you can fix it. And that's where documented delegation comes in. So let's talk about why delegation fails, because most MSP owners have already tried it. You hand something off, the person does it 80% right, you spend more time correcting it than doing it yourself, then you say, see, this is why I can't delegate. And what happens? You go right back to being the hero, the closer, the fixer, the final escalation point, the human backup system for the whole company. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most delegation doesn't fail because your team is bad. It fails because what got delegated was a task, not a transferable operating method. That's a huge difference. A task is update the ticket. A transferable operating method is here's how we update this class of ticket in this PSA for this client type, with these notes, this escalation threshold, this quality standard, and this timing expectation. See the difference? One is labor, the other is leverage. And MSPs feel this more than a lot of businesses because your world is full of recurring complexity. Tickets repeat, but never in exactly the same way. Onboarding repeats, but every environment has nuance. Client communication repeats, but the tone and urgency shift based on context. So if you don't document the thinking, not just the clicks, your team ends up improvising. And improvisation is expensive. Recent MSP commentary from WorkSent laid this out really clearly. The real growth bottleneck for a lot of MSPs is broken documentation, inconsistent SOPs, and knowledge trapped in technicians' heads. That shows up as slow onboarding, poor CSAT, technician burnout, repeated escalations, and difficulty outsourcing or white labeling without chaos. And I want you to notice something. Those are not separate problems. They all come from the same root. When knowledge is trapped in a person, then speed drops, consistency drops, confidence drops, and margin drops. That's why documented delegation matters. It's not admin work, it's margin protection, it's service consistency, it's quality control, it's risk control. And the reason this hits MSP owners so hard is because the same pattern usually shows up in 3 places at once. First, ticket handling. Your L1 or L2 team can solve a lot, but they still need somebody's brain for edge cases, special clients, weird historical decisions, or undocumented exceptions, so tickets bounce upward. Second, client delivery. QBR prep, onboarding, offboarding, procurement follow-up, vendor coordination, renewals, approvals, reporting, dispatching. A lot of that should be procedural, but if it's not documented, it becomes personality-driven. Third, internal operations. Hiring, onboarding staff, reporting cadence, meeting prep, vendor management, project follow-up, leadership handoffs. All of that gets stuck to the owner or one trusted operator. So when people say, I need to scale, what they often mean is, I need less dependency on memory and more dependency on systems. That's a different conversation. And I think that's why some MSPs keep adding headcount and still don't feel relief. Because more undocumented people inside an undocumented structure doesn't create scale. It just creates more motion. And if this is hitting a nerve, good, because that means we're actually talking about the real thing.
All right, so what does documented delegation actually look like in real life? Let's make it practical. Documented delegation is when a repeated activity gets handed off with the method, not just the assignment. It's when the work leaves your plate and at the same time a repeatable standard gets created that the business can keep using. That's the magic. And honestly, this is where a lot of owners overcomplicate it. They think, okay, I need this giant SOP library before I can delegate. You don't. That's backwards. The fastest way to build documentation is usually to document while the work is being delegated and performed. That's a much more realistic model. One of the smartest MSP operating ideas out there is basically a document as you work policy. Not document someday, not we'll build the wiki later. Document as you solve. Document as you hand off. Document as the team works. And that is exactly why at Pro Sulum we lean so hard into the VSA model. Because a VSA is not just there to take tasks. A VSA documents the process while they're doing the work. That changes everything. So instead of you saying, hey, can you help with onboarding, ticket updates, vendor follow-up, and client communication, and then hoping it sticks, the VSA is actively building the repeatable operating system as they work. That means every recurring handoff becomes more valuable over time, not less. So let me give you a few MSP examples. Let's say you've got an owner still checking dispatch notes, rewriting ticket summaries, cleaning up communication before it goes to the client, following up on project loose ends, and stepping in anytime something feels vague. That owner says they need more support. Maybe, but more specifically, they need that vague zone documented. What good looks like, what done looks like, what gets escalated, what never should, what tone gets used, what screenshots get attached, what internal notes are mandatory, what client exceptions exist. That's documented delegation. Or take onboarding. A lot of MSPs say they have an onboarding checklist. Cool, but can a new person run it cleanly without 3 Slack messages, a shoulder tap, and the owner jumping in halfway through? If not, then you don't really have onboarding documentation. You have onboarding reminders. That's a big difference. And this matters financially too. Healthy MSP operations usually keep owner escalations below about 2% of ticket volume. And if you're north of 5%, your escalation rules probably are not doing their job. Think about that. If the owner is still touching too many tickets, too many approvals, too many edge cases, then the business is telling you in numbers that delegation has not been properly documented. And this is where the Pro Sulum approach gets really practical for MSPs. What we see over and over is that MSP owners start by offloading routine tech-adjacent work, ticket updates, client checkups, and low-value operational tasks that high-end engineers or owners are still doing by default. That's smart. You do not start by handing off the most strategic thing in the company. You start by pulling repetitive work out of expensive brains. Then you document it. Then you tighten it. Then you expand. That's how you scale without breaking quality. And by the way, if you need a fast first step, Pro Sulum's free SOP tool is a useful bridge. You can go to instant.myprosulum.com and turn a repeated task into a draft SOP fast. Not as the whole solution, obviously, but as a way to stop pretending the process is basically in your head and kind of written down somewhere. So, let's bring this home. If you remember nothing else from this lesson, remember this. The opposite of chaos is not hustle. It's documentation. And the opposite of founder bottlenecks is not more heroics. It's documented delegation. Because your MSP does not scale when you get better at carrying more. It scales when the business gets better at carrying work without needing your memory, your constant review, or your rescue energy. That's the shift. And that's why this matters so much right now. The pattern keeps showing up the same way. Poor documentation slows onboarding, increases escalations, wastes technician time, hurts consistency, and keeps owners trapped in the day-to-day. Meanwhile, the MSPs that document processes and reduce founder dependency are the ones building healthier businesses and, frankly, more valuable ones. So if you've been feeling like growth is somehow making your MSP heavier, if you're still the person too many decisions route through, if delegation keeps turning into rework, if your team is good but the handoffs are sloppy, that's the signal. And this is exactly where Pro Sulum VSAs fit. Not as generic helpers, not as just get me an assistant, as the practical bridge between insight and implementation. Because the big promise is not just labor. It's that the work gets done and the process gets documented while it's being done. That is such a massive difference. It means you're not just renting relief for a month, you're actually building an asset. And for MSPs, that asset shows up as cleaner handoffs, less owner dependency, smoother onboarding, more consistent client experience, and more room for senior people to stay focused on the work that actually moves the company forward. At Pro Sulum, we talk a lot about documented systems, process-driven support, and building real operational leverage. And that's the point here. If you're not sure where your actual bottleneck is yet, that's fine. That's actually normal. A simple starting point is the Business Systemization Assessment at quiz.myprosulum.com. It's fast and it helps surface where the real drag is: documentation, delegation, process scalability, whatever is actually keeping you stuck in the weeds. And if you want the broader systemization angle, there's also systemizein5.com, which is a nice lightweight resource around systemizing, delegating, automating, and outsourcing without making it feel like this giant, impossible project. But if this lesson hit a nerve and you already know you're not dealing with a motivation problem, you're dealing with a systems problem, then just click the link in the description below and book a free discovery call. No pressure, seriously.
The value of that conversation is not that somebody's going to force you into something. It's that you'll get clarity on where documented delegation could remove friction, where a VSA could start, what should be handed off first, and how to stop paying senior level time for work that should already be systemized. And that's the real win. Less owner drag, less chaos, better consistency, more capacity, more room to grow without feeling like the business owns you. All right, that's it for this lesson. I'm Kevin with Pro Sulum. I appreciate you being here, and I'll see you in the next one.